the first thing that I want you to write down is the idea behind, as Jeff was saying, landscapes and rivers, which is how the proposal was written, and what the workshop, the theme behind the workshop. And we would like your lessons to have something to do with that theme, but as Jeff said, the basis of it is to use the images from Picturing America. So you may not have landscapes and rivers in each of your lessons. But the hope is that you're able to tie that in some way. That was the focus behind it. Maybe it's just in the theme or whatever. And in terms of landscapes and rivers both, you can use them either literally, where it is an actual physical landscape and you're looking at geographic things, etc., the physical terrain, the rivers, and such, things like transportation and how transportation changed because of the rivers. They can also be metaphorical. They could be social, cultural landscapes, political landscapes, economic landscapes. You could use well, it's gone, but George Washington was there. You could use the George Washington picture to talk about political landscape. The flow of commerce or something like that. So they can be literal or metaphorical, but the hope is that you're able to tie that in some way. And this particular region, if possible. The second thing, and this was something that I talked to you about yesterday, all three lessons do not have to tie together, and they do not have to be sequential. You're not writing a unit, so they don't have to be one right after the other. They can be scattered throughout the semester, depending on your needs for your classroom. You might see a particular image that fits great with something you're doing in September, and another image that fits great with October.
Can I back up to when you said this region?
Well, Indiana, Kentucky, etc. That's how the grant was written. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio. Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio. And so they don't have to be sequential. They don't have to go one right after the other. They can, if that fits best for your classroom, and that's what you want. But they don't have to. What I would say is they have to have formative assessments within them. They have to have checking for understanding. And I had mentioned yesterday, I don't want them to just be a pen and paper test. But well actually I didn't even say test, I said pen and paper. And as I thought about that and reflected upon that, I thought that they didn't give you quite enough information for that. It's okay to have them writing. It's okay even if you had a primary document and they had a worksheet that went along with it. That's okay, those are formative assessments. So I don't think that I was as clear as I should have been yesterday. It's okay to have them have a pen and paper, that's okay. What I meant was some standardized multiple choice test at the end of your lesson. That's what I was trying to suggest. And the hope is that they will have multiple formative assessments in each particular lesson. Now, typically a lesson is 1 to 2 days, so you probably aren't going to have more than maybe 2 or 3. But the hope is that you have at least a couple. You at least have a few formative assessments where you're checking for understanding. To dovetail off that, or I guess to build off that, one of the things I mentioned yesterday was authentic instruction, and a couple people mentioned it today as well. Authentic instruction in a nutshell is just that the students act, well, they do the traits or the characteristics of a professional in that field. For example, yesterday when you were looking at the primary documents, you were acting like historians. You were doing the things that historians do. You were looking at when the letters were written, who were they written to, when was the wanted poster made, etc. You were doing the act of a historian. When you were looking at the art, you were doing the act of being an artist. You were looking at the medium that was used. You were looking at the title. You were looking at when it was produced, who produced it, why they produced it.
So if you're visiting a museum or another site, one of the things you could have done was look at the secret of the label, as we call it. And if your students did something with their English literacy and took an image from Picturing America, wrote their own label, perhaps not this headstone, what we call this tombstone kind of thing, like who did it, when were they living, and so forth, but rather incorporated the idea of your metaphor, the river, whatever, wrote this descriptive little blob, and you can limit. The hardest thing is like texting, you know, how many characters can be in the darn label, and what grade level, you know, you can turn on Word and figure out what level it has to be for your primary museum audience. That would give
Absolutely.
them a curator's eye view, so instead of meeting a curator, although that could probably be arranged when you visit a museum, that hits another one of the standards, you could have them actually do something like that in the classroom and then compare them before or after they go to the museum.
Excellent, thank you, Kathy. That's exactly right. And that was one of the things I was
I
going to
didn't know
bring
I
up.
was doing authentic.
You are, authentic pedagogy, you're on it. I was going to bring that up yesterday. One of the things I did with art in my classroom was they didn't look at the caption, they didn't look at the title, and they created their own. Another thing is building off what Kathy said, you can have them write a little annotation, a little description of what that is. Those are all excellent things to do in terms of authentic pedagogy. You could, but then going off, it's Harvey, right? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Harvey had talked about that he read it, and then we all kind of discussed, is it good to let them see it in advance? I think there is value in that as well, because they're able to build context, and they're able to say, okay, this is when it was created, this is why it was created, what was the time period. So in terms of authentic pedagogy, many of the words that are used are things like hands-on, experiential, all of which play into that, but it's doing the act of what those people do in that field. If you're talking about literature, have them write, have them read. If you're talking about, have them read critiques of the work that they just read. Have them do the act of what those professionals do in that field. And sometimes that's difficult. Teaching kids, one of the common phrases in social studies is have kids be little historians. That's typically what's said. That's hard to do. That's hard to do for them to look at a particular primary document and have them investigate it and research it. But that's our hope. Our hope is that you can come up with some creative lesson plans where there is some authentic pedagogy going on and that they're learning in that way. The last thing, and I think once you start drafting your lessons, I think it'll be a little bit easier. We would like them to be truly interdisciplinary, and that may be tough. Only because some of you have very specific job descriptions in what it is that you do, and so that might be hard to pull in history, literature, and art in these 3 lessons. So you may not be able to. One of your lessons may only be art, and that's okay. But the hope is that you can pull in the 3 disciplines of the humanities and be able to infuse them, and to be able to come up with a 3 creative lesson plans where those kids are using all 3 of those and they understand how interconnected they are.